Hey guys, this is Elena Seungeun Lee from We Learn to Share. Welcome to the video of AP US History. In this we're gonna embark on a thrilling journey through the Reagan Revolution and the rise of conservatism in the 1980s. We're about to explore a decade of transformative changes, political maneuvering, and cultural shifts that shaped America's future. So basically, let's look at some of the backgrounds in this era, right? So the 1970s were very tough for America. Remember, they faced challenges like the OPEC oil embargo, stagflation, the Watergate scandal, and the Iran hostage crisis. But the 1980s over here brought a new wave of conservatism and optimism led by a charismatic figure, our president today, Ronald Reagan. So let's look at some key elements, right, about him before we dive in. So basically, his political affiliation, he's a Republican. He served president 2 terms from 1981 to 1948. He was born in northern Illinois. Before being a president, he was a Hollywood actor. He was also a spokesperson for General Electric Corporation. Also it's interesting that he had changed political affiliations because he was a liberal Democrat in his 40s, but then he became a free market political conservative in the 1950s, and then in 1962 he formally became Republican. And also he is a neocon, meaning that he is conservative in terms of economics, like cutting federal spending, but he advocated for defense spending, increase in defense spending. And his famous line, "Let's make America great again," became a rallying cry for conservatives. Okay, so let's look about Reagan's economic policy or economic philosophy. So, at this time of era, there was inflation, right? So what he said was that government does not place, right? There's no place for governments, but there are places for rich people and for corporations, because as the government will cut down income taxes and the capital gains taxes, then the richer people and the corporations would be able to accumulate wealth and kind of spend more money, and therefore the wealth will trickle down to the ladder of the society. And we have, for example, the 1986 Tax Reform Act, which made the top marginal rate, which is a tax paid by the highest income earners, very, very lowered to 28%. And by these kind of acts, you can see that economics or the supply side economics, cutting down taxes, right, for the richest, it was really, really kind of well shown in this Tax Reform Act. However, still, he was kind of more moderate, of course, than his worse, right? Because at the end of the day, if we look back at his presidency, the aggregate tax receipts kind of remain similar to his more liberal presidents. And another side of economics, or the supply side economics, is deregulation. And deregulation is removal of government regulations. And this is also, again, because he believed in minimizing the role of government in the market. He believed in the invisible hands, right? The power of the companies and the power of freedom regarding the market, right? So therefore, he placed these removables on government regulations in the free market. For example, the trucking and telephone industries were deregulated, and clean air standards for cars were lowered. And the path, he believed that's because as he does this, the path to economic growth will be done by tax cuts and by deregulation, right? Because it will trickle down, right? Because it will make them invest in new business and spend old ones employing new workers as a result. And at the end of the day, did economics turn out well? Well, that's kind of ambivalent, because although it had succeeded in some parts, it caused national debt to soar from under $1 trillion to $3 trillion between these years, 1981 to 1989. It also exacerbated income disparities. Right. But Reagan's revolution was not just about economics, right? Because it was also religious and cultural revival. We had the televangelists like Jerry Falwell and the moral majority, who played a significant role in advocating for traditional values and influencing conservative causes. Okay, so let's look firstly at his impact in the Supreme Court. Remember, because the president are the ones who appoint the Supreme Court justices, right? So let's look at how his presidency and how his rooting for conservatism had applied to this in this era's Supreme Court. So Reagan appointed a justice called Antonia Scalia to the Supreme Court. And Antonia Scalia, this person believed in original intention, and in which the justice could know the ideas of the framers of the Constitution and had no authority to change the ideas of the framers of Constitution. So this would be, of course, the opposite of the judicial activism, right? So it's kind of really preserving as the thing it is. It's conservative, right? And also, there was William H. Rehnquist appointed as Chief Justice. And Rehnquist was a conservative who led the court in limiting access to abortion, remember Roe versus Wade, and remedying civil rights violations. And then Reagan's presidency was not without just challenges because there were AIDS and war on drugs and some others. So Reagan's wife, Nancy Reagan, led the campaign against drug use for the young people with the iconic slogan, "Just Say No." And the PACO strike, which Reagan refused to negotiate with labor unions, showcased his strong anti-union stance. And there was the AIDS crisis that brought attention to the epidemic, although Reagan's initial response was criticized, right? Let's more look at AIDS. So AIDS, the disease itself was very, very discriminated among the people because, especially in the 1980s, because people perceived AIDS, the disease itself, as something that only homosexual men really gets, right? And hence the discrimination prevailed in this. However, as it comes to 1990s, in 1991, Hollywood famous person Rock Hudson, 1993 tennis star Arthur Ashe. This person also got affiliated with AIDS, and therefore it received more public attention. And in case for Reagan, in his first term, he had an hands-up approach. So he had silence on the issue of AIDS, and therefore the gay rights activists and the people affiliated with AIDS really criticized Reagan for his approach. And therefore, thankfully, in the second term, as if he realized this, he passed an executive order to establish the President Commission of the HIV pandemic. And also, he made he has initiated more money and investment in the research of the disease of AIDS and its treatments. And also, you can see over here that James Watt over here was appointed as the head of Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and Louis Sullivan as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And in the 1988, there was the Civil Liberties Act, in which he gave $25,000 to Japanese internment survivors who were initially confined into internment camps during the war in the past. And now let's look at one of the most famous things over here called Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars. So this thing was basically made because Reagan, although he was a neocon, meaning that he was a conservative, so he insisted on cutting the federal spending, but he was a neocon, meaning that even though he advocated for the cut down in federal spending or government spending, he advocated only for increasing federal spending in the realm, in the field of defense. So he had this strategic defense initiative, which is basically a military force. And he invested $400 billion to make a satellite laser missile defense system to shoot down Soviet missiles before they reached the US in the space. And Soviets kind of believed that America made this, and they tried to do that, copy it, but also failed. And so the Star Wars over here is also a very iconic thing that the President Reagan has done. And then over here, we have the title Teflon President and the incident with Lebanon. Because in 1982, Reagan sent peacekeepings in Lebanon, but a suicide bomber killed 200 Marines, US, but no one actually blamed Reagan even when things went bad. Because normally it's very, very common for their citizens to criticize the president if something goes wrong, but it didn't happen to Reagan. And that's why he got the name Teflon President, because no one blamed him even if something bad happened, right? And also in terms of more foreign affairs, there was involvement in 1983, Grenada, El Salvador. Reagan sent soldiers to stop communist revolution, so you can know that he was a staunch anti-communist president. And then we have Reagan's tenure witnessed some discussions about constitutional amendments that address concerns of the religious rights. So these amendments aim to strengthen traditional family values and communities. However, therefore, there were some constitutional amendments to, ban abortion and permit organized prayer in public schools. However, there were controversies like the Iran-Contra affair, which involved secret arms deals and negotiations that violated Reagan's initial pledge and faced criticism. So let's learn about the Iran-Contra affair. So, how to sum this up? This is basically this phrase, right? Kill two birds with one stone. And the two birds would be hostage and communism. So basically, Reagan was fighting, or a people affiliated with him, the government was fighting the hostage, or not fighting, or advocating for the release of hostages and to fight communism from the Soviet Unions by one stone. And let's look at that. So first, you have to understand this whole picture. So you can say there is the U.S. government. Let's write in a different color. Let's say that you have the U.S. government over here. And then over here in one part, there are the Contras from the Nicaragua, right? So you can know that the Contras over here, they were fighting against the Sandistas, the communist or the leftist government of Nicaragua. And then over here, there is Iran. And then there is Lebanon. And Lebanon has held hostage of U.S. soldiers. And then you can also know that Iran is a Shiite Muslim. And Lebanon is also a Shiite Muslim, not Sunni Muslim, which will be conflict. But you can just know that by having both the same religions, they are kind of close, right? And so Iran was currently in war with Iraq. And the U.S. gave weapons, right, to Iran over here. Because U.S. weapons are the best, right? So U.S. government will give Iran weapons. And the Iran will basically pay money back for it, right? And not only that, U.S. will give weapons, right, to Iran to use it to fight Iraq in the war. And also Iran promised to give the money back. And also Iran promised to influence Lebanon, to tell Lebanon to release hostages back to the U.S. And then Iran's money over here was used for the U.S. to use to aid the Contras in fight against the Sandistas. So you can see the whole picture how U.S. government had managed these two issues of releasing hostages from Lebanon and fighting communism by selling weapons to Iran, right? So this whole thing was the Iran-Contra affair. And this was problematic because it broke Reagan's pledge that he would never negotiate with terrorists, and also it violated the Bolland Amendment, which forbade military aid without congressional approval. So all of this was basically illegal, and some of the people within Reagan administration, like Oliver North, resigned. He resigned from his office because of this affairs and many other things. Okay, so, and that wraps up our exploration of the Reagan Revolution. The 1980s was indeed a very transformative period filled with political shifts, economic changes, and cultural developments. I hope you have enjoyed this exciting journey throughout history. Remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Stay tuned for more thrilling episodes of AP US History, and thank you for watching this video, and see you in the next video.